Good morning. Thank you for joining us for today's session from across the 3rd District. I want to welcome everyone to what is the final session of this virtual Ag Summit. And we really appreciate the opportunity to do this. Of course, I would prefer our interaction be in person, but given COVID and certainly the distances involved as well, we are grateful to be able to connect this way. You know, trade is not only important, but I think we have so much to celebrate in terms of expanded trade, different approaches to trade, so many things that have already happened, and I think capacity for more good news on trade. We know that, you know, we want Americans to buy American, but we want to sell American too. And the fact is, we want policies that can help us sell our products to other countries. We are a powerhouse, a world powerhouse in terms of agriculture production, and it's high quality. And to other countries, it's typically very affordable. And we want, though, to be able to sell it. And so we want to pursue policies to do so. You know, not long ago, President Trump said he made good on a campaign promise. Shocker there that that would happen, because it so many times it's been said before, oh, let's renegotiate NAFTA and so forth, and then it hasn't happened. President Trump campaigned on it, and he made good on that promise to redo NAFTA in a way that would put us in a better position. A lot of naysayers there, and quite honestly, as a representative of agriculture, which had done quite well under NAFTA, I kept a close eye. And I was very happy to be able to participate with the negotiations taking place both in Montreal and in Mexico City, and to just interact with stakeholders all along the way. A lot of folks said it couldn't be done. It got done. And I think we are all better for it. And it was a true negotiation. And probably the result being the most bipartisan vote on a trade agreement, certainly that I've ever seen. And I think it could have happened a few months sooner, perhaps, but that's all right. We got it done, and it is now in place. And I think we have more opportunity moving forward, starting on the trade agreement with Kenya and the UK. So many things happening. But I know that there's someone with us today who can explain things a lot better than I can, because this is his wheelhouse. He is the chief ag negotiator for our country, the United States Trade Representative, Gregg Doud. He has worked in the USTR office now, well, this time, well, I'll let him tell us, but he hails from north central Kansas. We try not to hold it against him that he's a K-State grad. But hopefully he's been off campus now long enough that it won't spread too badly. But anyway, we're grateful, though, to have Ambassador Gregg Doud with us, who has been serving in various capacities, but he knows what's happening as a producer himself. And so, Ambassador Doud, I'll let you take over now. I would encourage folks to, if you have a question, just to let us know in the chat line there with the Zoom application. So if you have questions, then we'll get to those after Ambassador Doud's comments. So Ambassador, please go ahead.
Well, thank you, Congressman, and good morning. First of all, I always tell folks from Nebraska that I grew up 60 miles straight south of Hastings, just across the border into Kansas, and I had 3 television stations as a kid, 4 out of Kearney, 5 out of Hastings, and 11 out of Lincoln. So I either would have learned to love the Huskers, or I would have led a very miserable childhood. So that's all we had on TV was Go Big Red and the black shirts and all that, 24/7. But and I do say that I root for the Huskers 51 weeks out of the year. Well, now, you know, more often than that. Loved your days in the Big Eight, and you guys want to come down and play us again in football? I think everybody would love that. We'd love to see you, K-State and Nebraska, play again in football. Those were some of the great times, and at least when I was growing up, and we finally started to be able to give you a ball game here, and hopefully we could do that again these days. So good to see you, Congressman. I want to talk about ag trade a minute and kind of give everybody an update. As the lead-in indicated, we've been busy. In fact, if you look at Canada, Mexico, Japan, and China, those are our top 4 markets for U.S. ag exports. In fact, and we've renegotiated our deals with all 4 of these countries since I've been in this office, 2.5 years. Completely unprecedented in history. These 4 countries amount to about 47% of our total ag exports. So the way I describe it in Kansas Farm Boy terms, we've overhauled our trading relationship with our top 4 markets, 47% since I've been of our total trade since I've been in this job. I want to spend a little time today talking to you about China and helping you wrap your head around what we've done with China, and to give you some perspective on this. And to start with, I'm going to give you some numbers. We have our trade data through the first 6 months of the year. You hear every day about the phase 1 deal with China and whether we're doing good, doing poorly, how are we doing? I want to give you some perspective and context so you can measure that. Our overall ag exports right now are down 3% through the first 6 months. And the easy reason for that is COVID. It is kicking our butts in a lot of parts of the world. In fact, one of the most devastating numbers for me is our beef exports to Mexico are down something like 57%. We are way down in Mexico. The Mexican economy is really, really soft. Their GDP is really struggled here this year. And so that's a real struggle for us. So overall, we're down 3%. Interestingly enough, though, we are up 11% to China. And our trade to China is doing very well. In fact, if you look at the last 5 weeks, on average, the last 5 weeks, 48% of our ag sales, total ag sales to the world, 48% of those are going to China. That is extraordinary. Because if you look at what we did in 2017, the baseline year of our phase 1 agreement, that number was actually only 18%. So that gives you a feeling for how strong the phase 1 commitment has been for us in China, given the softness in the rest of the world. And I want to give you some context here on phase 1 in China. When we were starting all of this trade discussion with China in 2018, total ag imports that China was importing from the world in agricultural products was $124 billion. Last year, it was $133 billion. This year, we think it'll be around $141 billion, China's total ag imports from the world. Why is that 141 number interesting, Congressman? Is because 141 billion is exactly the same number as U.S. total ag exports to the world. So China right now is importing from the world 141 billion in ag. Our total exports to the world are 141 billion. So in the context of this phase 1 discussion, what we're talking about is in 2017, the baseline, we sent 24 billion in ag to China. We're talking about this year being able to sell 36.5 billion, and next year over 40 billion. So we're in the context of the growth that I've described, taking our trade from 24 to 36 to 40, that's not a stretch. That's not a stretch at all. And here's why. If you look at the phase 1 agreement and everything that's in that, the biggest piece of the phase 1 agreement is actually agriculture. And in fact, there are some 57 specific structural changes that are in the Chapter 3, the Ag chapter of the China Phase 1 agreement. We negotiated the dickens out of those. The Vice Minister of Agriculture in China, he and I, we had 33 negotiating sessions to come to this agreement. 33 sessions. The shortest of it would have been 4 hours. Actually, in the room I'm in right now, I have a little PTSD when I look up at this screen, Congressman, I got to tell you. 33 of these, the shortest 4 hours, the longest one would have been all day in Beijing or here in Washington, 10 to 12 hour day. We spent hundreds of hours discussing and arguing and going back and forth over every sentence in this deal. 57 things to fix. Here's the key point. As of today, we have implemented, have fixed, have corrected, up and running about 50 of those. We have made enormous changes in our trading relationship with China in agriculture as a result of the Phase 1 agreement. On beef, we've ended the traceability, the age requirements. We're still working on the ractopamine. We got the hormone thing fixed. We've sent now over, we're right about $150 million, I think, on the books and beef to China, far more than we've ever done before. We've already, through 6 months, sold more pork to China than we ever have in any year in history. We finally got the poultry market reopened after being closed for 5 years. Our dairy, we haggled over dairy for hours. Our dairy exports through the first 6 months are up 23% into China. And so we are really, really doing well. The final point I would make is that on China is before we started this discussion, we had about 1,500 facilities in the U.S., pet food, hay facilities, meat facilities, you name it. We had about 1,500 eligible to export to China. A lot of how they restricted our ability to export them is they wouldn't update their list. We would send them new companies and new lists and new products to allow into China. They would never do it. For years, they would never do it. Congressman, today, we've taken that 1,500 to over 3,500 facilities now eligible to export to China across the board. One of the most amazing stories that I can tell here is that in mid-May, we had a big thing on nectarines and blueberries and alfalfa hay cubes and Timothy hay and all kinds of stuff from the Pacific Northwest that we had to get into China for the first time. And in order for them to do that, they had to come over here and do an audit. Well, it was May and COVID, and there was no way they were coming over here. That was just not a possibility. So, and the APHIS guys, the USDA folks, all the AMS, FSIS, they've all worked like crazy on this for the last 6 months to implement this. And they said, we have an idea. Tell you what, China, we'll videotape how we would do the audit. We will send you the videotape, let you look at it. If you have follow-up questions or whatever, we'll see if we can do it this way. Lo and behold, we sent them that video back in May. They opened up everything, said, looks good to us, we're ready to go. I have to tell you, never in my 28 years in this town would you have ever seen that out of China before this Phase 1 discussion. We have very much changed the relationship here. And in fact, this is the key thing I want to emphasize to you. I know you see all this stuff in the media. In this building, we are talking to our Chinese counterparts, if not every day, several times a week. The dialogue and the rapport is very good. That doesn't mean that we don't have still things that we're working on and fixing and talking about that aren't difficult. There are. But there is a great rapport there. There is a great ability to talk through things now and work things out that we've never had before with China. And I want everybody to know that. We're doing well. And I think we can continue to work on that, particularly in the agricultural space. In fact, this morning, I don't know if you've seen this or not, everybody, we sold China another 400,000 tons of corn this morning, 700,000 tons of soybeans this morning again. That was that was actually twice the amount of corn that I thought, based on my conversations with the trade, that we thought it was 2 or 3 boats this week. It was 6. So and in fact, I think with these sales today, the new marketing year begins September 1 for soybeans. I think it is accurate to say we were really close, within an eyelash before today. I think it is close to say when we turn the page to September 1, we will have a record number of soybeans sales on the books to ship to both China and to the world. So, that's already the case, I think, on corn. We have a huge book on corn, a huge book on soybeans now. We are going to be really busy loading boats come harvest time, and that's a really good thing. So let's wrap up and talk about a few other things. One of the most unsung trade deals in history is what we did a year ago with Japan. And that the credit goes to the president and to Ambassador Lighthizer to figure out how to do a trade deal with Japan. No offense, Congressman, that got us to our TPP. We got 90% of what we had in TPP, and we did it without Congress. And that went into effect January 1, and that was absolutely critical for our wheat guys, our pork guys, and especially our beef guys. Because what you were seeing is the tariffs were really beginning to separate, and we were getting left behind. On January 1, everything snapped back, and we're even with everybody else, and we're actually doing really, really well. Our trade with Japan is down just slightly. Most of that was meat related to what was going on with COVID a little bit here earlier this year back in April. And I think we've got all the wheels back on the wagon on the meat side of the equation. We're doing really, really well. USMCA has entered into force here. We have a few challenges with Canada on dairy that we know about that we're going to be working on here. We have some concerns with Mexico with regard to what they're doing on biotechnology and glyphosate. We're keeping a close eye on that. The next step here, we're very busy right now working on the UK. And I want to give you some context in that discussion. The UK is about our 15th, 16th biggest market right now. I think if we get that right, we can make them a top 10 market. My sense with the UK is they are not the EU. They do not subscribe to all of the crazy environmental and anti-GMO things that they do in France and Germany in the UK. I think they very much want to get with the program in terms of 21st century agriculture and the use of technology in agriculture. I'm optimistic that as we engage with them and we move forward, we're going to be able to extract the UK out of the EU and really demonstrate to everybody over in Europe that the US and US agriculture isn't scary. We're very, very safe. Our products are safe. I think we have a great potential there on the meat side of the equation if we can get some things sorted out here. They're actually, the tariffs into the UK are quite high. For some of our best products where the opportunity is, they're in the 20-25% range. If we can get those tariffs to zero, and that's exactly what we're going to do with a free trade agreement, that's what we do with all of them, we will have an ability, the UK imports $2.5 billion worth of pork, $1 billion worth of poultry, and $1 billion worth of beef from the European Union. $4.5 billion in meat. So if we could get ourselves on a level playing field, competitive into that market with the EU, we're going to get our share of that. It'll take some time to build that up, but that's a good opportunity for us. And I'm glad you mentioned Kenya. That's our first foray. It's kind of a pilot project now into Africa, and the Kenyans are very, very excited about this. This is going to, this is going to take a little time to build the capacity to get them where they need to be, but a great opportunity to show Kenya and to show Africa how to evolve in terms of the use of biotechnology and all the technology that we use in agriculture here, and help them build a trading system to adapt to that. And so with that, I think that's a good quick overview for you, Congressman, and we'll open it up for questions.
Okay. Thank you, Ambassador. Really appreciate that, the specific numbers there. And obviously there's a lot to be excited about, even amidst some of the challenges that we are facing. I would encourage folks to just type their question into the chat line there, and we will, Katie from my office, she handles trade issues. Also on the line is Eric Kamler from my Grand Island office, as well as Jenna Haney, who is my district director. So they very diligently make sure that I'm getting all the information from the various places as possible and moving forward. Ambassador, let me lead this off a little bit. I think where the president and your team has been especially effective is realizing that other countries want more access to our markets, and they haven't always opened up their own markets when we open up ours, therefore giving us this opportunity to really expand at this point. And I also like to make the point that, other countries, especially China, they need us. There's a narrative that, given our debt, that we've benefited somewhat from leaning on China, but I would argue that China needs us far more than we need them. And I just wonder if you could point to anything else. Obviously, the amount of sales to China these days, I mean, that's some underreported news there, and I certainly appreciate you for I want to thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that, and the fact that we are seeing more ag products going to China. You said we're up 11% to China?
Yes.
Right? Okay.
Yeah.
Anything else you could point to that supports the narrative that China, they need us to buy products, they need us in various ways. Anything that you would add to that?
It is so true. I know there's a lot of tension in a lot of geopolitical areas between the U.S. and China. And frankly, a lot of that's warranted. However, in agriculture, in our discussions back and forth, hundreds of hours, my counterpart was very frank with me. Greg, we want your agricultural products. We need your agricultural products. And I could spend hours talking about the context of our discussions. And I want to tell one story in particular is we have the new product in the U.S., the extended shelf life milk called Fairlife. You've all seen it at the 7-Eleven. You can buy Fairlife milk. And China had no ability, they had no regulatory ability to import that product. And we were trying to explain to them, this is what it is, this is what we want to do. And finally, Undersecretary McKinney got so frustrated one day here in Washington, over the lunch hour, he walked down the street to the 7-Eleven, bought an armload of Fairlife, and handed it out to the entire Chinese delegation, said, here, this is it, this is what we want to sell you. And they were all like, this is pretty good, this would sell really well in China. We're like, we know. We can't get it into the country. You don't have a regulation that accounts for this. And they were like, oh. And so when you see some of this stuff in phase one and you see these bullets and this template and you say, well, what is this? This was the outline for them in China to write the new regulation to allow these products into the country for the first time. And we got it done. And we can do this now. And that's why we're seeing our trade increase. And so much of these conversations were just, we face this in India today, we face this in Brazil today, we face this in China today, is politically they get it, bureaucratically the bureaucrats, they just kind of like, well, we don't know, so no, the answer is no, we don't want to do it. And so you have to get this kind of top-down push to say, no, we're going to fix this and do this because it's in the best interest of the country. That's what we accomplished in our discussions with China. I would argue for the first time in my career and lifetime, is really cutting through the bureaucracy to get things implemented and get things changed and get things done. So another example I would use right now, in fact, this is a conversation going on as we speak, and you know about it in the media, is the discussion with Brazil and ethanol. And it's the same kind of conversation. Brazil has access to the U.S. market for ethanol at a 1.9% tariff. We have access into Brazil, but they're wanting to jack up the tariff on us to 20%. And the president has said, I've said to them, no, if we're going to trade, the tariff has got to be the same going both directions. These are the kinds of things that USTR, we're fighting and dealing with every single day all over the world.
Mm-hmm. I was talking to a leader from Kenya a while back, and I brought up the GMO issue. They currently subscribe to the EU's approach to GMOs, and this is anecdotal, so please understand. But I kind of got the message from him that they didn't have a good enough reason to maintain those restrictions. And I guess I would see this as an opportunity to convince them to go by the science rather than the politics, and in so doing, help feed their people more affordably. And how much of an opportunity do you think it is with Kenya to subscribe to the science more than the politics and open up to GMOs?
Well, it's absolutely critical in Kenya because that sends the message to all of Africa that this technology is safe. And we are, and the same thing as with the UK, is you peel the UK out of the EU, get, the Prime Minister Johnson has said in a speech, and he said, he had one line there, and in one of his first speeches as Prime Minister, he said, and we have to get with the program with regard to the use of biotechnology in agriculture. The European, I've given a lot of speeches in Europe. We've talked to a lot of people in Europe. My message to the Europeans is very simple. When it comes to U.S. agriculture, we are not going back to using a stick and flint rock versus matches. We are not going backwards. We're not apologizing for how we use technology in agriculture, ever. And I've said that to the Chinese as well. And my counterpart in China has said, Greg, I understand technology and biotechnology. We want to use it. But Greenpeace and other folks have really scared our consumers. And you got to help explain to our consumers how this works. I understand that. And we do have to do that. And that's part of the discussion, as you say, with Kenya, is helping the general populace understand and help with the political leaders not get the pushback from the population. No, this is completely safe. This is how we're going to do this. This is the science behind this. It's a process, and it takes a lot of discussion, and it can't be just government to government. It has to be, an all-encompassing thing to get consumers comfortable with it as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right, Katie, I'll throw it over to you. It looks like we've got a few questions waiting. Go ahead.
Great. All right, so first question, and Ambassador Doud, you did just touch upon this, but is there any news on the Brazilian tariffs and ethanol and making the playing field more even for our ethanol industry?
The answer is that is the topic du jour around here, and that will come together here hopefully within the next couple of weeks. I don't have, it's what we're working on right now is all I can say.
Thank you. Next question. This is from Inside US Trade. Can you give us a sense of when we might see USMCA consultations begin with Mexico over biotech products? USTR Lighthizer in June told the Ways and Means Committee, I think the only way we're going to get that to change is first by consultations and then via an action, referring to Mexican treatment of biotech.
We don't typically give out timelines around here on when we're doing things. I will say that is certainly the dairy situation with Canada and the biotech situation with Mexico are definitely on the radar screen around here.
Thank you. Next question from Lisa. What is China doing to become less dependent on U.S. agricultural exports, or do you see them to continue to depend on the U.S. and South America, especially for soybeans?
Great question. And the answer is really interesting. And so let's back up and talk about hogs in China for a minute. Half the hogs on the planet are in China. And they've had a very serious disease there for the last 2 or 3 years called African swine fever. By some measures, China may have lost 40% of their hogs due to this virus. To give you some context, if they lost, what was the number? Something like 13% of their hogs. That's all of the pork traded in the world. 30% of their hogs, or 30% would be the same as all the hogs in the US. So they've lost an enormous amount of pork. They have imported a lot of meat. They imported $8 billion worth of beef last year. We've already sold them more pork this year than we did any time in history. But if you talk to them, they are emphatic that they're going to rebuild their pork herds in more of a Western style confinement operation. Half the hogs in China were swill fed, meaning they were fed food scraps, waste, not corn and soybean meal. I think one of the biggest changes in a long time in global agricultural trade has been China's decision to ban the swill feeding of hogs. So they're planning on moving this more into much more the US style corn and soybean meal type feeding operations. So if you think about the number of hogs we're talking about here, that means that China's demand for corn and soybeans is going to increase in a big way. And in fact, you've already seen in just the last couple of months here, China's imports of corn from the United States. In July and August, China has purchased the third and fourth single day biggest purchases of corn from the United States in history. We saw 405,000 tons of corn sold to China this morning. That is China beginning that process of making that change. And I think going forward, I wouldn't be surprised that if we probably won't sell as much meat to China going forward, even though we're going to sell a lot. But we are going to sell them a lot of corn and especially soybeans. Keep in mind, when I was in this business in 2002, I remember a big conversation with folks in the industry. Oh my goodness, China's going to go from 9 to 18 million tons of soybean imports, 2002. And the big discussion was, well, is that a trend or just a one-off? What's going to happen here? Katie, what does USDA currently have forecast for China's imports of soybeans from the world for this coming year starting September 1? So in 2002, it was 9 to 18 million tons. What's their number right now starting September 1? Can you tell me?
I have an idea that you would be able to tell me.
I can tell you. Are you ready for this? 99 million metric tons. That's a lot of soybeans. And in fact, we're going to sell China at least a third of that, we think. And Brazil is going to sell them, and Argentina is going to sell them a bunch of that. They're going to need a lot of soybeans, and we're going to be competitive with that, and they know that. And that's a relationship that we've already built, and hopefully will be ready for us for the long term here.
Great, thank you. Next question from Brett Hansen. Through the National Lumber and Building Material Dealers Association, we pushed hard for the USMCA, and thank you for that. Now we are seeing all-time building material pricing. Can you enlighten us on what the outlook for mills in Canada cooperating with the US to help our industry with pricing and shortages?
That's a fair question, I'm sure, but I don't do lumber. I know that's an agricultural product, but our industrial folks deal with that one. So that's not one I really have my head wrapped around. I apologize.
All right. Next question, and this is more of a procedural question. How would a change in presidents affect current negotiations?
That's a great question. And the question that has been posed to me on many occasions is, what would a change in administration do with the China Phase 1 agreement? And the answer is the agreement says either party can walk away from this with 60 days notice. And I think it would be very important to ask the other side what they plan to do here. I've seen where they've indicated that they don't want to keep it, which would be, I think, not a good idea, frankly, for us in agriculture. I think it'd be a bad thing, but I'm not going to get into all that. I'm going to ask everybody to ask that question because I think it's an important question. Because what we have here is really, really valuable for U.S. agriculture. It's something that for folks in this town that have worked on China stuff for my 28 years here, it's something we've always wanted. We've been able to deliver on this. And we have 50 of these 57 things done. We have an agreement on facilitating trade here in terms of actual dollar amounts. Nobody ever possibly dreamed we could do something like this with China. We're doing it, and we need to keep doing it.
Yeah. Let me just add to that a little bit. And I guess I might be a little freer to speak on this than the ambassador is. You know, USMCA, just as one example, I mean, Ambassador Doud's mentioned, but USMCA is a far more bipartisan result, a delivered result, by far more bipartisan than anything we saw before that. And I served with the Bush administration, I served with the Obama administration, and to see what took place with USMCA. Now, I'll be honest with you. There were a couple components to USMCA that gave me a little bit of heartburn, but they weren't deal breakers. And the fact is that approach that the president promised from the beginning, that approach brought a more bipartisan result. And I almost think that the system is still kind of shocked from.
Oh, there's
from
no question about it.
So, you know, I mean, one of the talking points that some folks like to use who don't like the president is, well, you know, TPP. Well, as the ambassador said, we have basically almost all of TPP now anyway.
Yes.
The fact of the matter is
That's correct.
Hillary Clinton campaigned against TPP. And so the president, carrying through with what his campaign dialogue was, I don't think anyone was surprised. They shouldn't have been. If anything, they were surprised if he was actually making good on it compared to what other candidates have done in the past. And so that bipartisan result with USMCA, I think, is one of the more effective precursors to launching us into further negotiations with other countries. Yes, the president prefers a trade agreement with one country at a time. I appreciate that. That's his prerogative. And you know what? We can make that work. Yes, I like TPP as well. But the president and others were concerned about that, and he won the election. And we can make it work. And the president has made it work. And I think it's very important to note that the president's opponent had his chance previously, and I think squandered that. But I don't want to get any further than that.
No, Congressman, you are exactly right. And I've reminded folks of that for years. TPP didn't have the votes. It would have never passed Congress. Never. And I had conversations with the head of congressional affairs in the Obama administration at the time, saying, you've got to make some changes here to get this thing through Congress or it's never going to happen. And he agreed. So you're exactly right about this. But to your point, I will say this: all around the world now, this is when you go to talk to folks on Capitol Hill, either side of the aisle, USMCA is the blueprint. It is the template for us in trade going forward. And so when you talk to the UK or you talk to Kenya, you say, here's the blueprint. We can, customize this a little bit for you around the edges, but this is it. We're not really going to deviate from this. And so if you're uncomfortable with this, then we're not probably your folks, because this is what both sides of the aisle in Congress, the administration, everybody agrees. We work through this with our two biggest trading partners here. This is what we're going to do. And I will tell you, Congressman, most countries are like, you know what, we're fine with this. We got a few things around the edges to work on, but the UK, I think, is good with this. Kenya, we've had several other countries say, we would love to do this. So your point is exactly right. And the guy that drove this home was the president. No question about it. When I first came in this job and I had this conversation, this is what we're going to do. This is going to be a big bipartisan vote. People laughed at me. Friends of mine said, there's no way, Greg. Every trade vote in history has been one vote, sliver either way. You're wrong. And Ambassador Lighthizer and the president changed the whole dynamic on this topic, I think forever in this town.
Right.
All right. Next question, it's a follow-up regarding Mexico and biotech products. Does the U.S. have a hook for launching consultations with Mexico over biotech products? The USMCA Ag chapter says the section does not require a party to mandate an authorization for a product of agricultural biotechnology to be on the market.
That sounds like some sort of media question that's very specific.
That's from Inside US Trade, yes.
I figured. All right. Well, these guys, they're very persistent about, talking about all these things. I will tell you this. In USMCA, we have specific language with regard to the dealing and use of biotechnology. And it's very clear what Mexico's requirements and commitments are. And if they don't, meet, they haven't approved a biotech trade since the current president has been in office, even on things like cotton, which they've been using in Mexico for 25 years. without any problem. So, you know, we have a couple of ministers down there in that cabinet that are very one-sided and anti-technology use in agriculture down there. We have our eyes on this. And if this gets to a situation where it's going to impede trade, we'll be on top of it.
Great. All right. Back to China. Thank you,
Yes.
Ambassador Doud, for your remarks. From what you're saying, it sounds like agriculture is a bright spot in the otherwise troubled US-China relationship, i.e., through the ongoing dialogue you said is occurring almost daily between USTR and Chinese counterparts. How does this dynamic help in the management of the complicated overall relationship, and why aren't we hearing more about it?
I think that is the question of the day. Whoever wrote that question, I want to congratulate you. I think that is spot on the money. In my conversations with my counterpart, he and I worked very, very hard to make agriculture a pillar of our relationship between the U.S. and China. He and I talked about it all the time. Food is important. You know, food is different. People have to have food, and you have to have food in order to keep from having, you know, unrest in countries. When you had the problems in the Middle East, it started about food. China is very sensitive to that, and they know we have the safest, most abundant, best food supply in the world here in the United States. They know that, and they want to learn from us, and they want to work with us to get better in that area. And I will tell you, I cannot emphasize enough how hard we both worked. And when I say we, I'm talking about when we would sit down together, the vice minister would have 30 or 40 people behind him. I would have 20 or 30 of our best people behind me. And we spent hours and hours and hours working through how to get two diabolically different economic systems to come together where we could trade together in food and agriculture. And I have to tell you, I think we were historically successful in doing that.
Well, great. That is a great note to end on. That is all the questions that we have for today. So Congressman, I go back to you.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Katie. And certainly, again, I want to encourage folks with trade questions at my office. Katie is the one handling trade issues these days. It's great to have her on the team. Her first week was in the middle of March when there was the exodus out of Washington, at least me and my family.
Wow.
So anyway, it is, we're grateful to have Katie on the team, certainly Eric in the district handling agriculture issues. Ambassador Doud, number one, I want to thank you again for your participation here today. I think sharing some underreported news and, of course, agriculture in general. We probably don't celebrate the advancements in many of the victories that we do see along the way. Certainly there are struggles, and we are mindful of that, but we should celebrate our victories more than we probably do. And to see that China, trade with China, ag trade, exports with China are up 11%. And I think that's largely due to the negotiations that took place under your leadership and Ambassador Lighthizer. But I'm so excited to moving forward to continue working on trade. You know, I joined the Ways and Means Committee because of trade, and knowing that for agriculture being the world's powerhouse in terms of ag production, we need to sell more of our products around the world. And when we can see developments, positive developments like this, I get pretty excited. So, and the fact of the matter is, even with developments like this, there's room for more. And
That's right.
We want to pursue that at every opportunity we possibly can. But as we have been discussing, the fact that we have more bipartisan interaction on trade these days is important to note. You know, President Obama actually relied very heavily on Republicans to get his trade agenda passed. President Bush relied on Republicans and a handful of Democrats, a very small handful of Democrats, to get his agenda pushed through. This is a new day right now with trade and in the bipartisanship and in the interest and the desire to get more out of our trade agreements. And I really salute that effort. I think, amidst all the skepticism that previously existed, it's been exciting to watch the, shall we say, new subscribers to the new ways of doing things on trade. And Ambassador Doud, you've been right in the middle of all of that, and I certainly appreciate your service. Your background is impressive, and the experience you bring to your current office, and I just think that it's exciting to move forward in this direction, knowing that I think there are more victories to be had. The world is watching. The world watched as USMCA was being drafted and negotiated, and so many folks here, even at home, said it can't be done. But it got done. It received an immensely bipartisan support in both the House, the Senate, and let's move forward. Let's look for the next trade agreement as well. So thank you to everyone for taking the time to participate here today. We appreciate your questions and look forward to other opportunities. I'm to see Ambassador in Nebraska in a couple of weeks, and I know you travel a lot, and knowing that Nebraska, especially the 3rd District, of being an agriculture powerhouse, we'll be glad to see you here in Nebraska. So thank you again to everyone. Thank you, Katie, Eric, and Ambassador, and we'll hope to see you soon in person. Take care.
See you in a couple weeks.
You bet.